What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Too Pop to Handle. I am your host, Andrew Nucatola, your pop culture best friend, and as always, I hope you guys are having a fabulous week. It is officially December. We have made it to the end of the year, which is crazy. I feel like I just recorded my 2023 pop culture moments, like a year in review episode, maybe 3 weeks ago, but alas, it was a full year ago, and now I'm getting ready to gear up and record my 2024 year in review, which it's just crazy, but you know what they say, time flies when you're having fun, and that's exactly what we are here to do on this podcast. December is, there are 4 major cornerstone pop culture things that happen in December that are really just very Too Pop to Handle centric. First things first, we have Miss Britney Spears' birthday. It just passed on December 2nd, so happy birthday, Miss Britney Spears. You guys know I have all of the love, all of the support for Miss Spears. Number 2, another major birthday for another major pop girl, Miss Taylor Swift. We all know December 13th. I mean, she makes it her entire personality, and we love that. We love a hyperfixation. So Miss Taylor Swift, her birthday is right around the corner. Number 3 is the one that, is universally celebrated. We have the holidays. Obviously, there's Christmas, Hanukkah, all of the holidays. Whatever you are celebrating, I hope you are surrounded by people that you love. I hope you get all the things that you wanted. I hope Santa brings you, whatever gifts. If you were nice, if you were naughty, that's on you. But number 4, and probably what makes me the most excited for this time of the year, and what really is just such a pillar in December or end of the year culture, I guess, is Spotify Wrapped and Apple Music Replay. And if you can't tell by the title of this episode, we are talking about my top 10 albums of the year, both statistically, because I'm outing myself. I am an Apple Music user, and I am not ashamed of it, but I did get my Apple Music Replay today, so I got to go through all of my albums and songs and artists, but I also have a list of my favorite projects from the year, which they're pretty much, they're all on the list, but they're not in the right order, because I'm a very big believer in the fact that just because it's your favorite album doesn't mean it needs to be your most listened to, and we'll get into that in a little bit. It kind of is a theme in another story we're going to talk about today as well, but I am so excited to dive into my favorite albums of the year, what I listened to this year, and just kind of, this has been such a crazy year for music, so there's so much to dive into. But before we get into the show, I just want to remind you guys that this is a safe space for you to post your Spotify Wraps. I want to see your Spotify Wrapped. I don't care if somebody tells you not to post it. I don't care if somebody said it's annoying. Post your Spotify Wraps. Post your Apple Music Replay. I want to see it. Tag me in it. Send it to me. Let's talk about why you listened to Taylor Swift for 10,043 minutes for this year. What is going on? Are you okay? And was it Taylor's version? I want to talk about it. So fuck everybody who says, it's annoying to post your Spotify Wrapped. I don't want to see it. I do. And that's all that matters in this, in this Too Pop to Handle universe. Screw them. Post your Spotify Wrapped. I want to see it. And on the topic of Spotify Wrapped, they also do a podcast Spotify Wrapped. So if any of my Spotify listeners or watchers, since I do upload video to Spotify now as well, if I am on your Spotify podcast Wrapped, first and foremost, thank you so much. That is the coolest thing in the world. And second of all, send it to me. Tag me in it. I want to see it. I want to thank you. I want to just spread the love. So if I end up, creeping into your top 5 or top 10, I don't know what the stat is for a podcast, but if I end up, creeping into your podcast stats for the year, let me know so I can thank you. And also just that's so cool. So that being said, let's get into the show because we have a lot to dive into before we even get to my Apple Music Replay. And we are going to kick things off with our Drew releases, which is where we cover our new music releases from last week and our new music releases coming up this week. Now, last week was Thanksgiving and Black Friday, so there was no music coming out last Friday, so we're just going to talk about what's coming out this week, and we have some very exciting ones this week. First and foremost, we have Khalid. So as of right now, he's releasing 3 songs this Friday. Something tells me he's going to be announcing collabs every single day this week leading up to Friday, and then it being a greater EP. But he, as of now, is releasing 3 tracks. Number 1, and probably the one that I'm most excited for, is Personal featuring Normani. I mean, Love Lies is a hit. It went number 1 in my heart. I love that song, so to have them back on a song together, I am so excited. The second song that he announced is Make It Up to You with Ira Starr. I don't listen to Ira Star, and if I'm pronouncing her name wrong, I am so sorry, but I'm very excited to see, what she brings to this track. And number 3 is one that I am very excited for. It is MIA featuring Chloe Bailey. If you listen to the show for any amount of time, you guys know that I am a Chloe and Halle stan, so I'm very excited to see what is in store for this. I'm also very curious. It seems like it's been the past 3 days, he's been announcing a collab with some other female artists, so I'm curious if it's just going to be these 3 or if for the rest of the week he's going to release one up until Friday. So we will see who else is on the docket for collabs. If not, these 3 I am very content with, so we will chat about those next week. Number 2 is somebody who is no stranger to Too Pop to Handle, and somebody who I am so excited for her album to come out next year. It is Miss Rebecca Black. She is releasing Sugar Water Cyanide this Friday. I love Trust, the lead single from this project that came out, I want to say it was like a month or 2 ago. Fucking love it. It is incredible. And this new song sounds so good. I love this like hyper pop direction she is taking. She kind of teases it throughout her music for a while, but like it seems like this album is going to be full hyper pop and just like electronic and fun, and like I don't know, I am into it. I cannot wait. So we will chat about that next week. And then the third and final release that we're going to chat about is an artist who I actually just discovered on TikTok, and she's kind of a smaller up and coming artist, but her music is so good and I'm so excited for this new single. Her name is Sophie Said, and she has a new single coming out called The World Is on Fire. I found her on TikTok because of the song, because she was teasing it and she wrote it after the election, and there's wildfires in New York. We just elected who as president. Like the world is quite literally on fire, and I heard it and I was like, oh, I like this song, and then I read the message of it and I was like, oh, she's real as fuck. And she actually has an EP out right now called Nostalgia Pill, and it has 4 tracks on it, and each track has a really unique, different sound to it, and it's just fun. There's some slower, there's some good. It's just like, it's a very good project. So if you're looking for a new artist to add to your playlist, I cannot recommend Sophie Said enough. Like I said, her EP only has 4 songs on it, so it's not too much to dive into. And then this new single comes out on Friday. The World Is on Fire. I am very excited, and like I said, we will chat about all of these releases next week, so I'm very excited for those. And that wraps up our new music. That being said, let's move into our moment of the week that were just too pop to handle, some pop culture rapid fire, kicking things off with Miss Charli XCX herself. She kicked off the BRAT Arena Tour in London over the weekend. She had 4 nights at the O2, and I mean, anybody performing at the O2 is a big deal, but when you are from the UK, like performing at the O2 is such like a monumental experience. It's like the equivalent of somebody in New York performing at Madison Square Garden. So I know that this was like a major moment for her, and this show looked so fun. Nobody surprised. It was her first show that she's done without Troy for the Sweat Tour, so nobody really knew what to expect. Obviously, we knew it was going to be very Brad heavy, and the set list wasn't that different than the Sweat Tour, which I think is totally fine. I think the way that her and Troy did the Sweat Tour and kind of handed it off seamlessly to each other like that, it opted for the perfect way to just kind of take Troy out of the equation and for Charli to make her full set. And I mean, it looks fabulous. It looks so much fun. She has some special guests come out. She had Caroline Polachek, Robin, Young Lean. So she was, really getting into the bratty vibes. And then the 2 biggest moments from the shows for me, and I think for the entire internet, number 1, she literally makes it rain inside during track 10, which is just like track 10. It's like, if you know, it's from Pop 2. It's one of those tracks that like when you listen to it for the first time, I remember specifically being like, what the fuck am I listening to? And it has just become such like a staple and like a holy grail in the Charli fandom kind of thing. So seeing her perform it on a stage this size with the rain and the production and like just finally having her moment, anyone who's been a Charli fan pre-Brat and just like has kind of been waiting for her to have this breakthrough moment, it feels like that moment of her performing in the rain indoors on stage, specifically to track 10, is such it's like such a moment, and it just, I love the performance. She looked insane. It looked so much fun. I don't know if this is what's going to be the tour that comes to the US next year, but we will see. Regardless, I cannot wait to see Brat live again. It is just, as you'll learn through this episode, and if you've listened to any episode of this podcast for the entire year, you guys know Brat has just been like everything to me. So I am very excited for whatever she has in store for that tour next year. And then we also, this is like the moment that broke the internet, was George Daniels doing the Apple Dance. It's been like a running joke that George has never done the Apple Dance. If you don't know, George is her fiance. He is also from the 1975, which I feel like some people missed that lore. Like there's videos of Charli at 1975 shows and people are like, oh my God, Charli XCX is here. And I'm like, well, she's there because she's marrying the guy on stage. Like, it's, I feel like that's like a chapter chapter of lore that some people don't know, because a lot of people did kind of hop onto the Charli train a little bit late, which no tea, no shade, it's just the truth. But so there was this whole like thing on TikTok where somebody asked her if George had ever done the Apple dance, and she was like, nope, George has never done the Apple dance. So it just kind of became like a meme within herself and the internet and the fandom. And during one of the nights when they did the Apple dance and they had somebody go up on the screen and do it, it was no other than George Daniels. And it was just so funny to see him doing it. It's such like not his vibe, but with the moment that BRAT is having, and like I said, performing at the O2 is such a big deal for anybody, but especially if you're from the UK. So I love the fact that he did it there for her. She even said, she was like, I didn't even realize it was George doing it until after the fact, because she was just so in the moment, like having fun on stage and doing her thing, that like it didn't even click. So obviously it was a surprise for her, such a big weekend. Her parents were at the shows. Like it was just such a big weekend for Charli. So I just love to see, I say it all the time, but seeing the success and like all the, just the good things that have been happening to her for the last year, couldn't be happier. And I am so excited to see what 2025 has in store for her, because like I said last week, it appears that she is not slowing down. And on the topic of some concert news, we had a huge concert announcement today, and I am so excited for this. Kendrick Lamar and SZA are going on tour together. They announced it this morning. It is called the Grand National Tour. It is co-headlining in stadiums next spring. And now personally, I love a co-headlining show. I think it is so fun to see two artists come together and just like mesh their artistry, put together like a show that just like weaves their music together so flawlessly. I mean, we just saw it with Charli and Troy on the Sweat Tour. Obviously, Beyonce and Jay-Z have done 2 co-headlining tours now. Yeah, On the Run 1 and 2. Like just seeing any co-headlining show is so cool to me. So I am so excited to see how SZA and Kendrick kind of tie their music together and create this set together. I've seen Kendrick and I've seen SZA a bunch of times. Both of them put on a killer show. So the two of them together is just like, it's a match made in heaven. And also I was saying it last week, I just love their voices together on any track that they do. With the 2 new ones on Kendrick's album, they have All the Stars, Doves in the Wind. Like they've been doing collabs together for a while. So I think it would just like imminent that they were going to do a co-headlining tour together, and I am so ready for this tour. I cannot wait. They are doing 21 dates together. The tour starts in Minneapolis on April 19th and it goes through June 18th and ending in Washington, D.C. So they're going all over the country in that time. Tickets go on sale this week. Actually, if you're listening to this on the day that this episode comes out on Wednesday, tickets go on sale today for the pre-sale. So if you want to get your tickets, get your coin together, get these tickets. I cannot wait for this tour. There's also some rumors going around that Doechii might be opening, and if Doechii gets added to this lineup, it is going to be such a crazy show. It's going to bring it to a whole different level. I'm obviously a huge SZA fan. She is one of my faves. Actually, if you're watching the video, she's literally on my wall behind me. I have the Control album on our gallery wall. I'm not the biggest Kendrick fan, but I respect and understand why he is as big as he is. And like I said, I've seen him live before and he was on a killer show, so I'm very excited to see like what he brings there. But if they add Doechii to the mix on top of it, it's just going to be, it's going to be bonkers. I cannot wait. I am so excited for this tour. I'm talking about it like I have tickets for it already. So this is me manifesting that, you know, the pre-sale goes well tomorrow and I secure some tickets. I'm not feeling too worried about it. It's a stadium. So there's, you know, there's ample opportunity and I do have the pre-sale, so I should be good, but cross your fingers, cross your toes, because I cannot miss this show. I am so excited. Speaking about shows that I could not miss, and I did actually see at the same venue that SZA and Kendrick are performing at in MetLife Stadium, the Eras Tour. So over the weekend on Friday, Miss Taylor Swift released her Eras Tour book and the anthology on vinyl at Target exclusively for Black Friday. We talked about it when she announced it a few weeks ago, but the book is here. And there's some fun little anecdotes in the book about the tour that I thought would be fun to chat about. The first thing wasn't something that was actually in the book, but this was something that was really interesting to me to learn, because when I found out Taylor was writing this book and it was coming out, obviously my first thought was like, oh, is she going to get a New York Times bestseller? Like, is it eligible for that? And it's actually not. And it's as simple as the fact that it was only released at Target, so it's not eligible to become a New York Times bestseller. I also don't know if a book of this, I say magnitude, but I mean like lack thereof magnitude. Not like she wrote a story or a novel or anything crazy. Like it was just kind of like long Instagram captions on the pages of the era. So that's where I was kind of wondering if it was even like eligible for it because of the contents of it. But it's not even eligible regardless because it's only sold at Target. So I guess if you can't buy it everywhere, it can't be eligible for it. I thought that was interesting because I was very curious. I was like, is she going to add another like award to her belt? But she isn't eligible, but I don't think she really cares about that. I do wonder at what point in her career is she going to release like the memoir or the book or something, because I feel like obviously she is such a songwriter and like so in tune with writing, and obviously when you listen to Folklore and Evermore, all these characters and stories that she created or like pulled inspiration from her life and like made these characters up with, there's always that question of like, when is she going to do something other than music? Is there a movie she's going to write? Is she going to write a book? Is it going to be about herself, or is it going to be, you know, like a novel or something? So I am curious to see where that timeline is. I don't think it's anytime soon, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the next like 5 years she ends up writing a book. We will see when that is in store. But that being said, obviously we're getting way ahead of ourselves. Like I said, there were some fun little anecdotes in this book that I thought it would be fun to chat through. So she said that she wanted to add the Tortured Poets Department to the show because every other era felt so colorful and so like vibrant that she wanted to add a stark black and white era to the show to really just like play some contrast with the show. And we all know Tortured Poets Department, like it is obviously, there's a lot of like heavy and sadder messages throughout it, and just like it's definitely, when you compare it to other eras, it's not as bright or lively. And I never really thought about the fact that like it is such like a stark contrast in the show itself, like going from, you know, like Lover, Speak Now, it's purple, 1989 is all color, like even Evermore and Folklore, they're slower and sadder songs, but she has the colorful dresses she does, you know, there's a lot of color throughout this show. So visually, when the show is going like color, 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 and then there's just this like stark black and white moment throughout the show, maybe because I didn't see it live, it didn't like have that effect to me, but like it is such like an interesting concept to think about, like this like pause in the show that just like completely throws the rhythm of the show off. And obviously it's still showcasing Taylor because it is her album, but it really does kind of throw the show for a bit of a loop. And when you think about it, that's exactly what Tortured Poets Department did. Even when she announced it, she was up on stage accepting her Grammy, and we all thought she was going to be announcing Reputation Taylor's version, but lo and behold, she announced that there is a whole new album. And then the whole album rollout, we're all like, oh my god, it's going to be about Joe Alwyn, going to be about Joe Alwyn, it's going to be about this, da-da-da, and it ends up being about Maddie Healy. So like Tortured Poets really does kind of throw us for a loop through the entire, you know, lifespan that it's had. So I thought that was a really cool thing for her, that like that was her point with it. And when you think of it in that limelight, it really does kind of like, it really does hold true even in the retrospect of the Eras tour and like how it came out. So I thought that was a fun little moment throughout the book. She also said that the reason she didn't just embark on a Midnights tour is because she hates doing what's expected and what she's already done. And then later in the book, she said that she fell in love with the rest of her catalog while she was re-recording it. And I think she just has like a new appreciation for all of that music and all of the, like, that's what got her to where she is now. So though obviously re-recording is it's not like the best situation because of like what happened, obviously, but I do think it was kind of like a happy accident that it did happen to her, because she's clearly having this renaissance with all of her old music as she's re-recording it. And though those songs at that moment were about maybe this ex or that ex or this moment she's going through, re-recording them as a full-grown woman, some of those songs she recorded when she was 14, 15, like she was young when she was recording some of these tracks. So to be re-recording them as a 30-year-old woman is probably such like a almost like a pulse check, like, oh my god, you went through this. It probably felt like the end of the world when Joe Jonas broke up with you, or it almost felt like the end of the world when Kanye West and Kim Kardashian were like coming down your throat, but like look at where you are now, look at what you've accomplished. And like it's got to really be such like a full circle and like proud of yourself, like pat yourself on the back, Taylor, you did it kind of situation. And as she's re-recording these albums and re-releasing them, us as the fans are seeing that as well. Like I remember listening to 1989 Taylor's version walking to work, and like listening to Welcome to New York Taylor's version while I was living in Manhattan, and thinking about when I was like, not to get deep, but like depressed when 1989, the regular version came out, listening to Welcome to New York. And I was like, wow, I'm 19. I think I was 19 when it came out. I was like, I'm 19 years old and I still live at home. Like I was on Long Island. Like was so dead set on living in New York as soon as I graduated high school, and just like, you know, the cards didn't fall there for me. But now I'm here. So like listening to Welcome to New York Taylor's version, walking to work that morning, I even had like a renaissance with it where I was like, oh my God, like you know, like you think back to the time of when the album came out and where you are now. And like for us to be experiencing that, I can't even imagine the magnitude that Taylor's experiencing it at. So that really does kind of open up and make more sense as to why she did choose to do the Eras tour. And it just, you know, it's cool to see that like this is such a moment that we're all living through together, whether you were a fan when she first released the albums or, you know, you've hopped on a little bit later. Like it's just a fun little nod to her past and what's gotten her here. And it's really just like the album and the re-recordings are more than just, you know, more than just her doing it for the money of it. She doesn't need the money. She's good, but like, it's like a celebration of her career and like reclaiming who Taylor Swift is. So I love that she's able to celebrate that every night on the Eras tour. And that wraps up, you know, the Eras tour book. I didn't buy it myself. It's not something that I see myself grabbing. I don't need more things, you know, in my life to collect that are just going to sit on a shelf. But I do think it is a really cool and like beautifully done collectible item for anybody who is interested in that. And while we're on the topic of Black Friday really quick, it has been reported that this year's Black Friday had the highest amount of dollars spent in the past like so many years, which is just crazy because I swear 4 weeks ago, everybody was so worried about the price of gas and the price of eggs when they were, you know, in the polls voting. But now everybody is out and about spending money like it is nothing for Black Friday. So really interesting, you know, how the turntables. But that being said, we're going to keep the ball rolling and talk about something that is so exciting and kind of like closing a chapter in the podcast. We officially have the #1 Best Pop Star of the 21st Century by Billboard. I have been recapping this list since they released their honorable mentions, and we have finally made it to #1, and it is no other than Beyoncé, Giselle, Knowles, Carter. And I am so happy to be reading that sentence. When I first started reporting on this like list that they were making, I always said #1 and #2 was going to be Taylor Swift and Beyonce. Like that, it was obvious. Those were the two that were going to be not battling, but going back and forth for the #1 and #2 spot. And obviously last week we knew that Taylor was #2, which only left Beyonce as #1 because like realistically, who else was it going to be? And yes, they finally announced it today. And as a pretty much a lifelong Beehive member, I've been writing for the bitch since Destiny's Child. Like seeing her getting her flowers all these years later in her career and still being like thriving and just like killing the game with her music, it is so incredible. So Billboard released their article with it and they said, while Taylor Swift is the century's biggest pop star by the numbers, from album sales to streams to touring dominance, our editorial staff chose Beyonce as our greatest pop star of the century based on her full 25 years of influence, evolution, and impact. The greatness of Beyoncé as a pop star is both immediately obvious on its surface and worthy of extensive exploration in its vastness. You can watch her on stage for half a minute and instantly recognize that she's an all-timer. Her inherent combination of dazzling beauty, impeccable fashion, captivating staging, otherworldly, physically, and simultaneously earthly and skyscraping vocals all speaks for itself. But to understand the full scope of her impact also requires a deep knowledge of 21st century American pop music and culture and the ways in which she has dominated it, elevated it, and transformed it over the past 25 years. Few artists this period can match her in any of those most critical basic categories of pop stardom: commercial success, performance abilities, critical acclaim and accolades, industry influence, iconic culture moments, and absolutely no one can equal her in all of them. Even Taylor Swift, the lone artist who really challenged Beyonce for the top spot on these rankings, and who does have a clear statistical lead on Beyonce in many key categories, more on that later, I'm not going to get into that, but that's just what they said, simply hasn't been around for long enough to be able to match the expansiveness of her quarter century of dominance. There are no flop eras for Beyonce. There are only varying degrees of winning for over 2 decades. In this sense, her closest peers of the century are not other pop stars. They're LeBron James and Serena Williams. Mic drop. They said it perfectly, and whoever wrote this article was clearly, they were up on their Beyonce history because they were pulling out like all of the 100 things that they did. They were pulling out all of the niche Beyonce references and moments and just like things that people don't, like they forget about, Obsessed, the movie that came out in 2009, like so many moments in Beyonce's career that aren't necessarily highlights to the masses, but like the fans and the hive know. And I just think the way that they worded this was so perfectly done, because the argument that people were raising online was like, yes, Taylor has sold more albums maybe, or Taylor had bigger selling tours or more #1s, and that's great, and that's why she got #2. But when you really boil down like influence and longevity and being able to really like live through so many different eras of music, Beyonce was literally, she debuted with a cassette tape. And she has lived through CDs, streaming, a vinyl resurgence, digital, physical, music videos on TV, releasing full visual albums. Like, she has literally been adapting and changing and shifting culture. Do we not remember that in 2013, when she dropped her self-titled album as a surprise, she dropped it on a Friday? Back then, music was getting released on a Tuesday. Her sales shifted the charts so much that it forced everybody to release music on Fridays going forward. And all of these years later, 11 years later, we are still releasing on Fridays because of this Beyoncé aftermath. Like, there is no denying the impact and the cultural shifts that she has had on society. Even thinking about, like, when Lemonade came out, people were going crazy. The amount of Tidal subscriptions that people signed up for just to watch Lemonade, like, people weren't doing what Beyoncé was doing. And now people are like, oh, a surprise drop, surprise. I'm like, don't forget where the surprise drop really became, like, cultivated and, like, became so popular. It was Beyoncé. The best music marketing we have ever seen for any artist of our lifetime will forever be Beyoncé's self-titled album, dropping it with no press, no announcement, no nothing, and just iTunes going completely black and pink and completely taking over. Like, I will never forget when that album came out, and it truly was like a cultural shift, whether you want to admit it or not. And I don't think there is anybody more deserving of the number one spot on this list than Beyoncé. You can argue with the wall, you can argue with your stats and look at your charts and pull up your sales and your tours and your this and your that. I get it, that is fine. But like they said, no other pop star has led the charts the way that she does for 25 years. That is such a long career to be adapting, changing. People struggle to survive a 10-year pop star career. Doing it for 25 years and continuously being at the top of your game and elevating your game and continuing to just, like, prove your artistry and your stardom and everything that you have in this music world. Nobody does it like Beyoncé. She said it herself. She's been the number one diva in this game for a minute. And that is why she is the greatest pop star of the 21st century. Beyoncé, I bow my hat to you. You are forever the queen. And we are not done talking about Beyoncé just yet. We are moving on to the main point of the show. So we are wrapping up our pop culture rapid fire moments and going into the main point of the show, which are the best albums of 2024. So first of all, Rolling Stone started off this conversation and they released their top 10 albums of 2024 earlier this week. Coming in at number 1 was BRAT, followed by Cowboy Carter, then Manning Fireworks by MJ Lenderman. Short and Sweet was number 4. Number 5 was Hit Me Hard and Soft, Billie Eilish. Number 6 was Tyla's self-titled album. 7 was We Don't Trust You by Future and Metro Boomin. Number 8 was Eternal Sunshine. Number 9 was Doechii with Alligator Bites Never Heal. And number 10 was Tiger's Blood by Tachi. No idea how to pronounce that. Not familiar with the artist. I apologize. No hate, no shade. So looking at this list, a lot of my top 10 are also on this list. So it started getting me thinking, like, what are my favorite albums of 2024? And then Apple Music Replay came in this morning and I instantly was like, all right, this is the main point of the show, but we're not going to get into it just yet. Rolling Stone also released their list of their top songs for 2024, so I wanted to go through those really quick. Coming in at number 1 was Good Luck Babe, Chappell Roan. Number 2 was Not Like Us, Kendrick Lamar. Number 3, a bar song, Shabuzi. Number 4 was Espresso. 5, Birds of a Feather. Number 6 was Too Sweet by Hosier. Number 7 was Nasty by Tinashe. Number 8 was Pink Skies by Zach Bryan, garbage. Number 9 was Girl So Confusing featuring Lord, iconic. And then number 10 was Rich Brian, Back to It. So those were their top 10. Honorable mentions, they had number 11 was Ya Ya by Beyoncé. So when I was reading it, I was like, where is she in the top 10? But she did get number 11. And you know what? She was number 2 on their overall album. So I'll give it to them. They did sneak her in right at number 11. Some other honorable mentions. Number 13 was We Can't Be Friends, Ariana Grande, which, spoiler alert, is my favorite song of the entire year. Number 22 was Diet Pepsi by Addison Rae. Number 23 was Angel of My Dreams by Jade, which all just, like, fantastic songs. We really were fed a full course meal this year with pop music, and we are so lucky, and I'm very curious to see what 2025 has in the landscape of pop music, but I'm getting ahead of myself because, like I said, I wanted to go through and chat about my top 10 albums based on my preferences and like what I think are the best albums released. So these are just like my choices for the top 10. And then we're going to go into my Apple Music replay and look at the stats of what were the most listened to. And that's kind of what I was talking about at the top of the show, where I don't necessarily think just because it's your favorite album of the year doesn't mean it needs to be your most listened to. I think back to like my favorite albums of all time, Melodrama by Lorde, Torches by Foster the People. Like those two albums have been two of my all-time favorite albums since they were both released. But honestly, I don't listen to them that often. I just, sometimes I'll be like, oh, I want to listen to this song, but I don't turn those albums on as often as I do newer music. And maybe that's a me thing. I tend to kind of just gravitate towards whatever is newer and like what is, what vibe I'm looking for. So it kind of leads me to that idea of like, just because it's my favorite album doesn't mean it's my most listened to. And that's why I thought it was interesting to look at like my favorite top 10 list and then also like statistically what I listen to. So I'm going to go through my top 10 list. We're going to go 10 to number 1, and then we're going to go through my Apple Music replay, my top 15 artists, top 15 albums, and top 15 songs. And then we're going to chat about what to look forward to in 2025. So without further ado, let's discuss my top 10 albums of 2024. I feel like this is a big deal. I feel like I need like a drum roll. I need confetti. I feel like I'm giving out awards. This is major and something I've been like so excited to do all year long, and now it's finally here. Oh my God, let's get into it. Coming in at number 10 on the list is The Tortured Poets Department by Taylor Swift. I think this album is so fantastic and so great. My only reason it is so low on my list is because I don't listen to it that often, and I love the songs on it. I love the whole surprise announcement of it. I love, the shock of when we listened to it for the first time and it was about Maddie Healy. I mean, I did a whole 3-hour episode breaking down this album track by track, lyric by lyric with my friend Delaney and explaining like why the depth and the layers and everything in this album are so incredible. But when it comes to 2024, I just didn't find myself revisiting this album as much. And honestly, it's kind of because I was overwhelmed with it. It was so fun to talk about the idea of a double album drop for years, and then we finally got it, and I found myself literally like overwhelmed with the album, and like it turned me off from listening to it, because when I go to an album and see that it's 32 tracks long, however many hours long that is in length, I'm like, oh my God, that is a commitment, because I like to listen to albums in full. Like when I put an album on, like I'm more of a full album listen through person than just like picking a few songs and shuffling. Like I really have to be in the mood, So when I go to the Tortured Poets Department and I see 32 tracks, I'm literally like, that is a big commitment. And like, I just don't have it in me. I've said time and time again, my perfect album length is like 10 tracks, 45 minutes, like 30 to 45 minutes. Like I love when an artist doesn't need to do too much on an album to get the point across. And though I don't think Taylor did too much on this album, whether it's the first standard edition or the anthology, seeing them together and like obviously like the first half is more Jack heavy, the second half is more Aaron Dessner heavy. Like I do tend to listen to the first half more if I listen to anything, but it was just very overwhelming. And I think with all the music coming out, like looking at a 32 track album when there's also every other main pop star in the world releasing albums at the same time, it was just like a lot for me. I love the album. I think it is fantastic. It's not my favorite Taylor album by all means. Like I would say it probably falls somewhere in the middle of Taylor albums for me. It's not at the end, but it's definitely not near the top. But yes, Tortured Poets Department comes in at number 10 for me. Coming in at number 9 is Miss Casey Musgrave's Deeper Well. When this album came out, it was on constant repeat. I love this album. Casey Musgraves has had such an interesting evolution through her career. She started out so country roots, like true country music, and then she started dabbling in pop, and like when she dabbled in that like country pop vibe, it soared. I mean, she literally won Album of the Year for Golden Hour. Like that album took over that year, and it is such an incredible album. It's still one of my favorites. But when she's kind of been experimenting going back to more of like that country slowed down kind of roots, which typically isn't something that I'm interested in, but something about Casey Musgraves, her writing and her voice is just so soothing to me. So between like listening to her lyrics and just like hearing her voice, something about it is so calming. So though I typically wouldn't love a slowed down album, I could not get enough of Deeper Well. I was so sad I couldn't make it to the tour. I had things going on. I really, really wanted to see the show. So I'm like low-key crossing my fingers that she does like a gov ball, or maybe she adds a second leg or something, because I really would love to see this album live. Every time I've seen Casey, I'm always blown away. She has such an amazing stage presence, and I just feel like this album come to life on stage would be so fun to see. But that being said, Deeper Well it's just a fantastic album, and I feel like it kind of gets forgotten about and gets a little lost in the shuffle because it was released back in March when like Beyonce, Taylor, Ariana, like all of these people were releasing back to back to back. It was like a non-stop revolving door of music, and I feel like it kind of got lost in the shuffle for some people, but it was always there for me. I loved it. It's such a great album. If you haven't listened to it, I could not recommend it enough. It is fantastic. Coming in at number 8 is my girl Dua Lipa, Radical Optimism. And now, this album did not get the respect that it deserves. Is it Dua's best work ever? No. But I guarantee you, in 4 years, people are going to turn to this album and be like, we should have appreciated this album when it came out, because it is fantastic. I don't know if it was just like an overconsumption of music, like oversaturation rather, like maybe it was that or the marketing for it. It was a very weird rollout. It was like very slow, and like we didn't really know the direction she was taking because the visuals came out before Houdini, and like it was like supposed to be this like psychedelic vibe, and then it ended up being this like beachy vibe. Like it was definitely a little confusing, but I do think that a lot of people are going to have a renaissance with this album in a few years. She's touring it later next year. So I think between like that and just like the way people cycle through music every few years, I do think Radical Optimism is going to be one of those albums, kind of like an art pop, where like people didn't get it when it first came out, but give it a few years and it's going to grow on people. I love this album. I think it is fantastic. Dua Lipa just doesn't release bad music, and I will go to the grave saying that. And this album has such solid tracks on it. I love it. I mean, Dua Lipa just can do no wrong in my eyes. So there was no way this album was not making it on my top 10 list of the year, because it is just, it's fantastic. Coming in at number 7 is a new girly on the scene who I have been obsessed with. My friend Liz introduced me to her earlier this year. She had like a viral Twitter moment, and I have not been able to get enough. It is no other than Rachel Chinariri. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know that I love her, but her album this year, What a Devastating Turn of Events, is truly incredible. Rolling Stone actually included it in their list of 100 albums. I think it came in at like number 38, which is like very impressive for your debut album in a year where there was so much music coming out. To land in that spot in out of 100 for Rolling Stone, like good for you, girl. You deserve it. This album, I cannot say enough good things. It is just so good. It has a little bit of everything for everyone. It has some upbeat pop, has some slowed down. She kind of has this cool, like, not alternative, but like she slows it down, gets a little more acoustic, a little more she's definitely not like a pop girl in that sense, but she has some pop songs. Like she just has a really good range of music. Her voice is incredible. She's British, so you really hear her accent come through, and she's just so fun, and like you can tell that she really appreciates anybody who listens to her music, and I just love her. She's opening for Sabrina on the UK and European leg of her tour, so I really hope that her opening for Sabrina just like skyrockets her even further into the stardom that she deserves, because it is what she deserves. And I'm telling you now, listen to Rachel Chinariri now, because she is going to blow up in a few years, and you're going to hear it here first. So Rachel Chinariri, What a Devastating Turn of Events, comes in at number 7 on my 2024 top 10 albums. And it is another debut album. It is Doechii, Alligator Bites Never Heal. I cannot get enough of this album. I saw Doechii at Jingle Ball last December, and I was familiar with her. I knew her music, like I liked it, and I was like a casual fan, but my boyfriend Thomas was like a stan. He was like, we have to go early and make sure we see Doechii because I'm dying to see her. And from the second she stepped on stage, I was like, this bitch knows what she's doing. She was so captivating and just such like a killer performer. And then we saw her at Gov Ball over the summer, and she just like blew me away all over again. And then her album came out later this year. She is incredible. She is having such a moment right now, and it is so well deserved. She is releasing rap and R&B music that like nobody else is really doing. She really has her own flow and she just has her own lane that she's in right now, and she's just incredible. If you have not listened to her, if you were into female rap at all, put Doechie's album in your rotation. It is perfect from start to finish. There are no skips. It's like she's got some humor in it. Like she has fun with it. Her flow is just nuts. Like she has such killer one-liners, especially like Nissan Altima, which is like the big song that I feel like most people know. When you listen to the lyrics of that song or like read them if you're trying to learn them, she has killer lines. She is incredible. I'm so excited to see what 2025 has in store for her because I feel like she is about to just like have this crazy skyrocket moment. She's already like, I think she's the most nominated female rapper of the year at the Grammys. She's the first female rapper to get nominated for like rap album. I'm forgetting what the exact statistic is, but like she's already doing big things in her career and she's so early on. So I'm just so excited to see what is to come for Doechii. So she needed a spot on this list. Coming in at number 5, we're already at the halfway mark, is no other than Billie Eilish, Hit Me Hard and Soft. I absolutely love this album, and seeing Billie's evolution from her first EPs to her first album, the second album, now the third, like she has really evolved in her sound and like how she creates music. I feel like she's always had a unique sound and a unique perspective in her music, and like she always was doing something different, and this album just like proves that she has such an artistic mind. Between her and Phineas, like whatever was in their genes, their parents, like they worked overtime to make these two so musically inclined. This album is nothing shy of perfection. I love it. When I went to the listening party for it back whenever that was at the Barclays Center, it was such a cool experience to listen to this album without the lyrics and without, being able to read what she's saying and just like watching it as her mind kind of envisioned it with all like the smoke and the lights, and she was just there just like dancing and having fun and like enjoying the music. And I think that really gave me a new perspective with this album. And whenever I listen to it, I really listen to it thinking about like the colors that she wants us to see, or like the feeling that she was like giving us while she was dancing around to it at the Barclays Center at the listening party. Because like I said, we didn't know the lyrics, we didn't know the songs. It was our first time ever listening to it, and it was just such a cool experience, and it gave me such a deep appreciation for the album, let alone the album just being incredible in and of itself. Like the production on it, the lyrics, the creativity behind it. It is such a beautifully crafted album, and I'm so glad that she is just like getting the success and the flowers that she deserves for this one. She always ends up killing it with her album. I mean, both of her first two albums are obviously so well received that I wasn't shocked that this one performed so well and like was so well perceived, but you never know when an artist, puts out a new album. You never know if they're going to go a new direction or whatever, but Billie just continues to like reinvent her sound while still staying true to like her artistry, if that makes sense. In this album, it is fantastic. I freaking loved it. Moving on to number 4, Miss Beyoncé Giselle Knowles-Carter, Cowboy Carter. I mean, I did a whole episode on this album itself, recapping it and going lyric by lyric, track by track with my friend Gotti, and just breaking down how important and incredible and perfectly crafted this album was. I think when Beyonce announced that she was releasing a country album, everybody kind of was like, oh, that's different. But it's Beyonce, and if Beyonce's going to do something and change something in her career and, genre shift or do something new, she's going to do it to a level 300. Like, she is never doing anything shy of absolute perfection. So I remember that during the Super Bowl, her announcing that it was going to be a country album and being like, I don't like country music, but Beyonce's doing it, it's going to be good. And lo and behold, it's fucking fantastic. Music aside, and just like the artistry and like all of the production and, the craft behind it, just the message of this album, especially after this election and, the political climate, just like the way that she is really reclaiming the music that people of color have introduced to the world and kind of gotten taken away from them, and the way she's paying homage to country artists, both of color and white country artists. Like, she's really paying homage to the artists that built the roots of country. And I've said it time and time again, she's literally from Texas. She has always had country in her roots, and she's always kind of, dipped back into country. And we all know this album was kind of born out of spite almost because of what happened to her at the CMAs when she performed with the Chicks. So clearly this album was like a really personal album for her to release. And I think everything was done with such perfect intention. I mean, having Dolly on it, having Miley on it, Willie Nelson, introducing Shaboozey, introducing all those country female artists on Blackbird. Like, she really was like creating this door of like, here's country past, here's present, which is me, and then here's the future of country music with these artists that are emerging and, you know, coming. I mean, look at Shaboozey now. He has had such an incredible year, and obviously he is very talented in and of himself. Like, he can hold his own, but like, he really blew up, and he was the second artist of color to have a #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100 charts, only second behind Beyoncé, and realistically is probably because of the hype and the exposure he got from being on Cowboy Carter. Like, she's showing respect to the ones who came before her. She's dominating herself and saying, I am Beyonce, like, I can do whatever I want, and I've always been country, so here is a country album, and here are the artists that are up and coming in the country world and are going to continue to carry out what country music is and like what she loves about it. And I just think it's such a cool message to follow through the whole album, and let alone just like the music being fantastic. Truly, like, some of her most incredible songs I feel like are on that album because they're so beautifully and artistically done. Like, this album is just, it's one for the books. I love it. I think it is so cool the way she's doing this trilogy project, and I could go on for hours and hours and hours about Beyonce's artistry, and I quite literally did on the Cowboy Carter episode that I did. So if you're interested in a breakdown of the entire album, you can scroll back and go find that. But this album, Beyonce, you will literally always be famous. And moving on to number 3. Oh my God, we're in the top 3, which is crazy. Coming in at number 3, another album that I did a full album recap on because it is just that good and there were so many layers to it. Sabrina Carpenter, Short and Sweet. I mean, when you think of 2024 and you think of music, Sabrina Carpenter is going to be one of the main people who comes to your mind because she just dominated this, not just the pop space, the music space. Like, the way she took over with Espresso, Please, 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 like, she has had such a moment this year, and it is just it's so cool to see somebody who has been working for this for so long. And, you know, she's calling this her second album, but she's put out 6 albums in her career, and like, Emails I Can't Send was really like a new chapter and era for her, and I think it really just like set the tone for like, hey, I am not here to just be like a Disney Channel X act. Like, I am here to make a statement, do the damn thing, and like release killer pop music. And she has just had such an incredible year. And I'm so happy to see her thriving and just like still staying on top after all of this. This album, I mean, like I said, I did a whole episode breaking down track by track what the album what the messages are and what I love about it, you know, but it just, there's like fun tracks, there's slower tracks, there's a little bit of like a country moment with Slim Pickens, we get a little ballad moment, we get some fun upbeat pop. Like, she just really covered it all, and she really showed us that like, she is not a one-trick pony, she is here to stay, and she is like cementing herself in the pop music space. And this album just, it elevated her and her career to such astronomical levels. It is incredible. I mean, I feel like everybody listening to this has listened to it. I still cannot get enough. Like, every time I listen to this album, it sounds new, and it is so, it is perfect. I love it. So good. And now we have made it to my top 2 albums of the year. Now, this was so hard to pick between these 2 albums because when I tell you they are neck and neck, I mean, there is probably literally a strand of hair between them, between which one is, you know, takes the cake for me. But I will explain why I chose how I chose in just a moment. But coming in at number 2 is BRAT by Charli XCX. I mean, if you want to talk about a pop culture phenomenon, we are talking textbook chapters on BRAT. From the way that this album just like, she released the album cover of a green background with blurry black font, and people were like, what the fuck is she doing? Not me. I was like, you know what? Charli XCX is smart. She knows what she's doing. Like, she's doing this to make us talk about it. You know what I mean? The whole rollout, the music videos, like everything she did for this album was so perfectly done and just so serendipitous, let alone the music just being so good. What I love about BRAT and what I love about Charli XCX is she's not making us do mental gymnastics with her music. She is literally telling us that she went her own way and she made it. She's our favorite reference, baby. Call her Gabriette. She's so inspired. Whoa. Like, she is literally writing it out point blank in our face. Like, we don't have to do mental gymnastics that we have to do with Beyonce, with Taylor Swift, with Sabrina Carpenter, with Ariana Grande, spoiler alert, my number one. Like, and I love that. I love dissecting lyrics, and I love diving into it and being like, oh, it could mean this, it could mean that. But with BRAT and with Charli, she is giving it to us as it is, point blank period, and it's fun. She's giving us these real life experiences and making it, even though it might be like a sadder message, or it might be something that's like a little taboo to talk about, like, she makes it fun, and she does it in a way that, like, you can just tell she does not give a fuck what people think, what people say. She is having fun. She is just living that life. Bon Dutch. I think what she did with BRAT this year was so monumental, and not that it was an accidental success, but I don't think she ever could have imagined the way that this album was going to truly take over the pop culture sphere. I mean, Kamala Harris was literally using her as one of her main campaign strategies for a while. That is how impactful and monumental this album has been. Like, it is truly one for the history books, and let alone like all the remixes, the remix album, like the way that just led up to it. Like, there were just she's breathed so many new lives into what BRAT is and has made it fun. It's not tired. It doesn't feel like she's trying too hard or stretching, because she's not trying hard. She's doing this in an authentic and a genuine way. And even with the remixes, yeah, she re-released the entire album, but every single song pretty much was completely reworked and revisioned, but still stayed true to the original song. Like, that's not an easy task to do, and she did it so flawlessly. She paired the artists for the remixes on the album so perfectly. Like, it is incredible what Charli was able to do, and I'm so happy to see it's finally clicking for people that Charli XCX is such an incredible artist. And it is so, as somebody who has been a fan of her for so long, it is so incredible to finally see her getting her 10s, because it's what she deserves. And coming in at number one, like I said, I kind of spoiled it, but we have no other than Ariana Grande, Eternal Sunshine. It is no shock to anybody listening to this podcast that this album it was like, when it came out, I truly was like, holy shit. This album was, it's just unbelievable. It is hands down my favorite Ariana Grande project she has ever released. I think this is her most authentic and real and just raw songwriting, while still giving us like fun pop music, but also like these like raw and real experiences. We didn't even know that she was going to be releasing an album. Like, if you would have told me this time last year Ariana Grande was releasing a pop album before Wicked, I would have looked at you like you were fucking insane. And I think she would have looked at you the same way. Like, I don't think any of us could have predicted that this was going to come out, and I think that's what made it so good. She didn't spend years making it. She was going through whatever, was going on with Wicked and Ethan and her divorce and things like that. Like, she had shit she wanted to say. She poured her heart out for these lyrics. And then knowing Ariana Grande, like, she is such a musically inclined person, the way she produces everything, the way she always makes sure she has her hand in every single like vocal track and instrument, and like just like the way that her mind works, and seeing her musicality come through on this album, it was just a recipe for perfection. I truly like listen to this album so regularly, and I'm like, she did such a outstanding job with this album. Thomas and I, my boyfriend, if you don't know, Thomas's number one is Ariana Grande. That's like his number one favorite artist of all time. And him and I keep saying we want to sit down and do an Eternal Sunshine like album breakdown episode and go like track by track, lyric by lyric, which that will come eventually. We're thinking like maybe for the 1 year of the album, but I'm getting ahead of myself. That being said, him and I talk about this album where like, when you listen to what she's saying, and like, she makes these sad experiences that she went through, and like, she was painted as this and painted as that, and she had these narratives written about her. She, had kind of a messy divorce, and just all of this stuff. People were just like clinging to these messages about her, and she just took that, spit it back at everyone, and was like, you know what? I don't fucking care. this is what, I know what happened. I know I am, a good person, or, I know who I am inside. You will never know what happened, but if you want to write that narrative, here it is. And I think she did such a flawless job at being like, fuck you guys, here's my side of the story, but I'm not going to give you too much because you don't deserve it, because you instantly judged my character and were completely jumping down my throat over things that like, you don't even know the half of it. So this album, it is incredible. It is so good. And like I was saying, these two albums really were like a hair away from each other when they're trying to pick 1 and 2. But I listened to them through and I really was just like sitting with the production, the lyrics, just thinking about like the all around, not the message of the album per se, because obviously like the message of an album doesn't make it better than one or the other, but just like thinking about like the stylistic choices and what went into each album. And Ariana's album, just like knowing that this album wasn't even planned, like she fully kind of was like, well, I guess I'm releasing an album because I have so much to say, because everyone has so much to say about me, I'm gonna give it back to them. I just think it had a bigger stamp for me, and I think that's what makes it my number 1 of the year. But needless to say, all 10 of these albums, and there's so many other albums this year that just like I couldn't even fit in a top 10 because there's been so much music. I mean, Tinashe's album, Flo's album, like there's so many incredible albums that came out this year. So even narrowing it down to 10, up until like an hour and a half ago before I started recording, I was like, maybe this one should be number 5. Should that be number 6? And finally, I just had to like leave it as it was, because I was getting so nitpicky on where I landed things, because all of these albums and just like 2024 as a year in a whole has been such an incredible year for music. I feel so lucky that like I started the podcast at the end of 2023 and was fully able to recap 2024 as a whole, and just like being able to look back at all of the, not just like pop culture moments, but like the true musical artistic moments that we had this year. And like, it was just such like a bookmark year for music. And I'm so glad that I have all of these episodes to go back and listen to and like recap this major milestone of pop music that we had this year. That being said, that wraps up my top 10 albums, my favorite albums, but I wanted to go through my Apple Music replay. We're not going to talk about, each album, obviously, because it is very reminiscent of my list, but I thought it would be fun to, expose my Apple Music replay and tell you guys my top artists, albums, and songs of the year. Full transparency, it is very gay. If you've ever wanted to, if you're ever questioning my sexuality, which just looking at the way my wrists are so limpy in the video and like the vocal fry that I have, it's clear. No one's questioning it. But if you are ever unsure, just look at my Apple Music replay this year, because it's very gay. That being said, let's kick it off with my top 15 artists of the year. We have Beyoncé, Charli, Chappell Roan, Ariana Grande, Sabrina Carpenter, Taylor Swift, Dua Lipa, RHONY Recap, Rachel Chinariri, Billie Eilish, Megan Thee Stallion, Lorde, Girl in Red, Shaboozey, and Casey Musgraves. Full transparency, the only reason Shaboozey is on this list is because of Cowboy Carter. I have not listened to any of his solo music nearly enough. I've listened to it and I really enjoy it, but I have not listened to it nearly enough for it to touch this list. So that is solely just being pulled from Cowboy Carter streams. But that being said, having a full list pretty much of just women is the only way I want my Apple Music replay to ever look. This just feels so correct to me. Moving on to my albums, and actually the only one that we are going to chat about is number 1, and it'll make sense in a second, but going through my top 15 albums of the year as per Apple Music is number 1 is Rise and Fall of a Midwest Princess. And now you might be wondering, where was this album in your top 10 list? If you listened to last year's 2023 year in review, I think my number 5 album of 2023 was Rise and Fall of Midwest Princess. So it was on my list last year, and it came out last year. Despite it having all of the success this year, it was already one of my favorites last year. It didn't come out this year. It's not going on the list. But that being said, it was still my most listened to this year. There's no denying that Chappell Roan was the moment this year. Like I said earlier, when you think back on music in 2024, you're going to think Sabrina Carpenter, you're going to think Chappell Roan. Like, they are just there together. Like, the two of them, amongst others, obviously Taylor Swift, Beyonce, like Charli XCX, like there's so many other artists, but Chappell Roan had such a major year, and jumping on the Chapel train last year before she blew up and got popular, and seeing the success that she had this year has been so incredible. It's been so cool to see, and that is somebody who I am truly like watching with a magnifying glass to see what's to come in 2025, because I cannot wait to see what she does next. Music wise, I cannot wait. But going through the rest of my top 15 on Apple Replay, number 2, Cowboy Carter. Number 3 and number 4 were BRAT. Number 3 being the BRAT remix album, and number 4 being BRAT Extended. Number 5 was Eternal Sunshine. Number 6 was Short and Sweet. Number 7 was Renaissance. Number 8 was What a Devastating Turn of Events. Number 9 was BRAT Standard. I think the reason, I listened to all of them a lot. Like, I was honestly surprised that they weren't higher on the list. Like BRAT, the Standard at least, but because Spring Breakers and Guess were 2 of my favorites on the original extended version, and then when the remix album came out, I listened to that one just like more often because I wanted to like listen to the remixes and then go into the normal album, and I kind of jumped around. So I think that's why they are, marked the way they are, because I found when I listened to the BRAT remix album, I could get the first half of the remix album, the bonus tracks, and I could get the full album at the end. So it was funny to see like the way that they landed in that order. They technically went backwards. Like BRAT remix was higher than any of the other ones, and that was the last one to get released. But that being said, number 9 was BRAT Standard Edition, but it's clearly on the list 3 times. I was fucking obsessed with this album this year. Number 10 was Tortured Poets Department, which is funny. That's the only album on this list that matches on my like actual top 10 list and my streamed list. Everything else is kind of out of order, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, everything else isn't in the same order, but Torture Poets Department falls 10 on my streaming, and it falls 10 in my personal favorites of the year. So thought that was funny to look at. And then number 11 was Snow Angel Deluxe. You guys know RHONY Recap is my fucking sister. I will stream that bitch till the cows come home. I love her. Number 12 was Radical Optimism. Number 13, Deeper Well. Number 14, I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but the Wicked movie soundtrack has made it in my top 15 albums after only being out for 11 days. I'm not even going to comment on it. You guys know I have been so excited for Wicked, so I'm not surprised, but I'm a little shocked. But that being said, not mad about it. And then rounding out my list, number 15 was Hit Me Hard and Soft, Billie Eilish. Going into my top 15 songs of the year. Now this is going to come to a surprise to nobody. Number 1, 360, Charli XCX. Number 2, Yes and Ariana Grande. And I will say Yes and was my number 1 most listened to song up until like 2 weeks ago. They were neck and neck, so I really wasn't sure what was going to end up taking number 1, because the two of them, just like I was saying with my number 1 and number 2 favorite albums, they are hairs apart. They are neck and neck. And Yes and was I could not defeat this bitch. She would not stop being my number 1. Not a bad thing, but I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize I listened to this this song so much when it first came out, and then just combined with my album streams, it just like catapulted it to number 1. So 360 being number 1 over Yes and is a very new thing, but like I said, those two albums were so neck and neck for me this year that just makes sense statistically. Moving on, we have number 3, Von Dutch. Number 4, Club Classics. Number 5, Hot to Go. Number 6, Feminine Nomenon. Number 7, Talk Talk. Number 8, Red Wine Supernova. Then we have number 9 was Texas Hold'em. 10 was Super Graphic Ultra Modern Girl. Number 11 was We Can't Be Friends. 12 was After Midnight. 13 was Training Season. 14 was B2B. And 15 was Spring Breakers. Everything there feels absolutely correct, and I'm not shocked at any of the things on this list. And yeah, that wraps up my Apple Music replay for the year. My number 1 listened to artist of the year was Beyoncé, which she was also my number 1 artist last year, and she was my number 2 artist in 2022. So clearly Beyoncé is always going to reign supreme in my house, and that's the way I want it. If Beyoncé is not number 1, where is she going to be? You know what I'm saying? And the only reason she was number 2 in 2022 was because Lorde had just released Solar Power and she was going on tour. So I was just like in my Lorde element. And I believe they were like 150 streams apart. Like it was the closest little thing. So the message of this entire episode is Beyoncé will always reign supreme when it comes to the house of Andrew Nucatola and Too Pop to Handle. Wrapping up our album talk, I thought it would be fun to just talk about albums we're looking forward to in 2025. 2025, because after reading that list and all of those main pop girls releasing this year, you're like, who the fuck is going to release next year? Are we going to have a dry spell? But we will not. So these are some artists, some of them confirmed, some of them rumored, some of them I'm just hoping for. Number one on my list of people I want an album from is always going to be Lorde. It is time. I am ready. I feel like this is like the exact cycle, 4 years of her last 2 albums that she waited for. So I feel like 2025, we are finally going to get a Lorde album, and I am turning 30 in 2025. So I would love to have a Lorde album to, go hand in hand with my 30th year on this earth. Number 2 is Harry Styles. It is time. We are ready for it. It's always been rumored that it's coming out this year, and I don't think we're getting it anytime soon. So we have Harry Styles. Miley Cyrus, we know it's releasing, so I'm very excited for that. Gaga, we also know will be releasing, so I cannot wait to see what's in store for her. I mean, between the Coachella performance, the album, I just feel like we're going to have a crazy year for Gaga next year, and I'm really happy she waited to 2025 to release it, because I feel like she's going to be able to have her full moment. The next person is Tate McRae, another one confirmed. We know she's releasing. Very excited for that. I feel like she's like coming to her own, and she is really ready to just kind of like take the world by storm and just like continue releasing killer pop music. Next up, Jade, who I've just been obsessed with. It's not confirmed that she's releasing in 2025, but it's just to be assumed. We already have 3 singles that are like out of control, so I'd be shocked if she doesn't release an album in 2025 or an EP or something. So very, very seated for whatever Jade has in store. Next, Rebecca Black. We know that's coming out. I've been so into her lately. I've been into her for a few years, but like lately, like Trust and this single that's coming out this week sounds so good. Cannot wait to see what she has in store. And the final artist is Chappell Roan. Not sure if she will release in 2025, but it's pretty evident that she will be releasing something, and whatever it is, I am waiting. I have a silver platter ready for her to just plop it on my platter and call it a day. And that wraps up our main points of the show. It has been such an incredible year for music. I cannot say it enough. And I'm just so lucky to be alive in this like thriving era of pop music, and I cannot wait to see what is in store for 2025. That being said, I want to hear what your guys' favorite albums were. Like I said, tag me in your Apple Music replay, tag me in your Spotify Wrapped. If your Spotify Wrapped doesn't match with your actual favorite album of the year, just like mine did, shoot me a DM, leave me a comment if you're watching on Spotify, on YouTube. Like, let's chat about our favorite music this year, because there were so many good releases. Like, there's just so much music to talk about. So the DMs are always open. Tweet me, leave me a comment, message me, whatever it is. I would love to chat about your favorite releases and just, see where everybody landed with their top 10. So loved recapping all of these albums this year. And it was so fun to put this list together and really like look at the year of music and see, what we were fed this year. Also, we are still getting a SZA album allegedly. So Watch is going to come in and like fuck this list all up, which wouldn't be a shock because it happened with SOS and it was like instantly one of my favorites of that year. So let's hold space for the SZA album and see, when that comes out, if it comes out, and where that lands on this list. Because like cutting somebody from this list, it was already hard enough to narrow it down to 10. So cutting somebody and adding SZA in would almost be impossible, but I'm not going to rule it out because both of SZA's albums are 2 of my top 10 favorite albums of all time. And I just don't see her ever letting me down. So this new album or whatever she's working on, it might come in and knock somebody off the list. So stay tuned for that. But that being said, we have made it to our TV recap this week, and I'm not going to do full recaps this week because if you know, I recap usually Real Housewives of New York, Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. I've recently cut out the RHONY recaps because this season has kind of just been like a snooze fest, and I think everybody can agree with that. But this week we are going to talk about it, and we're going to talk about Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. But if you watch these episodes, they had very heavy conversations on both episodes. It was literally like one episode premiered one night and it was heavy. The next night was another episode and it was heavy. So I'm not going to do full recaps of the episodes, but I just want to like chat about the conversations that they were opening up on these episodes because they were very important. And it was not cool, but it was very, you don't always see reality TV taking serious moments like this and like giving it the limelight that it deserves. So I was really appreciative of the way that they, tackled it. And I thought they did a really tasteful and really good job while doing it. So first things up, we had RHONY. We have Erin and Jenna having a conversation about abortion. So trigger warning, if anybody is listening and, has dealt with loss or anything like that, skip ahead. I'll have my timestamps down below. But Erin and Jenna have a whole conversation about getting abortions and, being so scared in that moment and not knowing what to do. And Erin went her entire life up until, I guess, earlier this year, not letting her dad know that she had this abortion while she was in college, and just hiding this secret from people that like isn't something you should be ashamed of or hide from anybody. So I just thought that the conversation that Erin and Jenna opened up about the conversation around abortion, like their conversation was about their experience, but also the stigma and the conversation around it. I think we've come a really long way of like not making it so taboo, but obviously with the current political climate, again, like I said earlier with Beyonce, and just like this is all coming full circle, like it's a scary time to be a woman. And like, I think them having this conversation now, but obviously wasn't planned to come out when it did, but there is such a conversation to be had. And like, it is so important to do your research and know your resources and understand like the safe way to do it if you ever do find yourself in that predicament. And of course, I'm a man and I'm a gay man, so I will more than likely never be in the situation where I will never be in a situation where I need to get an abortion. But like any of my friends, if they've ever gone through it or have to go through it, like I think it's so important to like remind your friends that it is okay and normal, and like be a safe haven for them in those spaces, because some people just feel lost and they don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to deal with it. And I think, as you know, me, like I said, being a gay man who will never personally deal with that, I think anybody who might be in my shoes, or even if you are a woman and might deal with it or have dealt with it, I think it's so important to remind your friend and like be an open door for those conversations, that like if they're going through that, try to be a safe space for them and try to be there and like remind them that like, hey, this is okay. It's just something that people deal with. It's very upsetting. I'm not like undermining how upsetting that situation can be, but I do think that like seeing these two on TV talking about it and like having these open conversations, not just them, there's been a lot of more open conversations about it, but any platform you can give to a topic like that, I think is so warranted and so important. So I really appreciated that conversation, and just like it made me kind of reinforce, like I hope all my friends, and I think any of my friends listening or watching, I think they all know, but just, you know, reinforcing that like to be that safe haven for people, because some people don't have that with family or things like that. So that's all I'm going to say on RHONY. Very proud of the two of them for having that conversation. Then the next one, it hit a little bit closer to home for me. I'm not going to go too into detail of like where it hit home for me and like my life, but it just did. Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, Mary Cosby and Robert Jr. That conversation was so heartbreaking and devastating. This trigger warning for this, it was about addiction and struggling, you know, with drugs and substance abuse. Mary kind of just like had a breaking point. We've kind of seen it building up all season, of where she knew something was going on with her son, but didn't know what. And then she finally like had this breakthrough moment where she was like, I need you to tell me what is happening and what's going on, because this is not my son. You are not the person that I raised, and like what's going on. And he came clean and told her that he's been abusing drugs since he was 16 years old. And now he's probably in his 20s, I would say, give or take. And he doesn't go a day without taking like an insane amount of pills, and he combines it with acid and coke, and like is obviously just like struggling. And he was talking about how he feels like a stain in the world, and you know, sometimes he doesn't feel like he deserves to be alive, and really heavy shit that they were talking about. And again, just seeing a conversation like that come to fruition on TV, and like not giving it that stigma of like not doing it off air, I guess. Like a lot of people were like, they should have done this in private, it should not be on air. But I think those people, maybe they've never experienced somebody who struggles with addiction or struggles with something like that. And maybe I have a soft spot because I have dealt with people like that in my life. But I do think that the way that they handled it and the way that they showed it, and they were very open and honest about it, and Mary was so accepting, and Mary was so, like I said, understanding, and just like knew, like was there for her son regardless of what he was going through. She didn't like call him a monster or call him an addict or like make him feel lesser than in that situation. She was like, I'm your mom, I am here for you, I love you, and I'm going to help you get the help that you need and support you through it. And like, you know, Mary's had an interesting life. I'm not going to get into her, you know, background with her husband or whatever, things like that, but like you could really tell in that moment that like she was everything in her life, nothing matters as much as her son does. And to see her have that open conversation with him and be so comforting and like mother-like, and really like step into that role and be like, hey, I am here for you, I want to get you help, I'm going to get you help, and we're going to get you through this. And now knowing that Robert Jr. is in or was in a rehab facility. I don't know if he's still in, things like that. Obviously, that's none of anybody's business. But yeah, I just thought it was a really well done conversation. And again, these are heavy conversations that they were having. So that's why I don't want to do a full recap and be like, oh, well, Brittany and Bronwyn and Lisa were talking about this, and then Lisa and Mary went and had a conversation about overdosing with her son. Like, when it really boils it down, like those two conversations, both Erin and Jenna and Mary and Robert Jr., like everything else on the show is so benign. Like, I was like, I don't even care what happened the rest of the episodes. I just thought those two conversations also happening the same week was like, I don't know if that was on purpose or like how that happened, but I just thought it was like a very big and like a monumental week for the Bravo community and any of the Real Housewives people, because it really was conversations that we don't often see on shows like this. So I just thought it was, kudos to you guys. Claps, bravo to Bravo, if you will. And, shifting gears, moving on to our final segment of the show, we have made it to my yes and my mess of the week. If you are new here, we end every single show with a yes and a mess. My yes being something I am loving and my mess being something I am not loving. We always kick things off on a high note, and we are kicking things off with something so exciting that I am overjoyed to be reading. Alex Consani has officially become the first trans woman in history to win Model of the Year at the UK Fashion Awards. And to see trans women winning is something I will always applaud and always celebrate and always the trans community is the backbone of the queer community. And I just love to see these strong individuals winning and being on top. Her speech was also so just incredible, the way that she gave homage to the trans women of color who came before her. She said, "I'm the first trans woman to win this award, but I can't accept this award without thanking those who came before me, specifically the Black trans women who really fought for the space I'm in today." She named Dominique Jackson, Connie Fleming, Aaron Rose Phillips, and she said, "Those are the people who fought for the space that allowed me to flourish." And to see somebody like Alex Consani, who is such a funny person, but also then like flips to have these serious moments. Like, she's really had such a up and coming moment. I mean, she's in the Bratosphere. She's part of, she was in the 360 music video and she's so involved like in that, but also like having these trailblazer moments. Like, it is just such a win for the queer community, but more importantly, the trans community. And again, with the current political state of the world, like, it's a scary time to be any type of minority, but trans women, women of color, women in general are really the ones who we really have to look out for right now. So just any win for the trans community, I will take. And I love Alex Consani. I think she is just the bee's knees. So I loved this. So happy for her. And moving on to my mess, this is something that I feel everybody is fed up and annoyed with, and I've had it for a while, and I was like, am I just being over dramatic? And I guess more people are getting up to speed and realizing how annoying it is, but it is the current state of the iPhone Photos app. What the fuck were they doing when they designed this new iOS 18 app? It is so annoying and so confusing to use. I can't find my favorites. I can't figure out my photos. I don't know when I took a photo because they're giving me my recent days, my albums, my recent moments, my this, my that. There's new folders they're making. Everything is confusing. You're scrolling through and everything's minimizing and zooming in and zooming out. I don't know if I'm just like getting old and like not with it or hip with the time, but I like to think of myself as like a pretty tech savvy person. And for a while when I updated my phone, I was like, okay, maybe it's just me who can't figure it out. I need to play with it more. But now that more people are updating their phones to the new iOS, I'm like, okay, everybody's pissed off about this new Photos app because what the fuck is that shit? And I think that is the perfect place to end the episode. Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode of Too Pop to Handle. If you liked what you heard and you're listening to us as a podcast, make sure you leave us a 5-star rating, follow the show. Every podcaster says it. My light just died, so it's a perfect way to end the show. But every podcaster says it. Leaving a 5-star rating is the best way to support the show. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you give us a thumbs up, hit subscribe, leave a comment down below. If you are interested in getting some more tidbits of pop culture moments that were just too pop to handle in between episodes, make sure you head to the description down below and follow my Substack. Both of my lights just died, so they are really like, all right, enough, stop talking. I'm getting there. Like I said, my Substack down below. I send out newsletters every week and just other fun pop culture moments. If you would like to follow me on social media, I am at 2pop2handle on all platforms. My personal is at Andrew Nucatola if you'd like to follow me there. If you can't get enough of me yapping. I think that covers everything. I will chat with you guys next week. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will chat with you soon. Bye.